Hello and welcome to this week's What Were They Thinking? The first item this week regards something of an update on the CRISPR babies. As was mentioned last week, with the anniversary of this event, Dr. He has not been heard from, nor the babies that were involved. What we do have are the at least preliminary impressions of the public examination of the experiment and the results thereof. These results, after they've been analyzed by the scientific community, have been eviscerated. They have been publicly shamed as a failure of any kind of genetic engineering. Ultimately, it is likely to have made them not only more vulnerable to HIV, but may in fact have created other genetic disorders due to the off-target effects of CRISPR. This is what was initially thought when the claims of a successful genetic modification of embryos were announced by Dr. He. The fact that his own work now proves these original concerns were valid is only further evidence of a need to both regulate and to some degree control how such methods and techniques can be used going forward, which is another controversy, with different groups having competing interests and different expectations of how it can be used. In similar medical-like news, Australian researchers have developed what could possibly be a self-healing skin useful in burn grafts and similar. Researchers out of Australia's National University have explained that with special chemistry, they have engineered a hydrogel that can repair itself. This is useful, as most often similar compounds are weak. Those that are not weak tend to be relatively brittle and once broken cannot be fixed. Others again cannot readily form shapes and will remain gelatinized. This particular development incorporates all three of those properties, which could be important in medical applications. In far more positive reproduction-related news, MIT has been developing what they call once-a-month birth control. Unlike the current medications which require either an implant or daily doses, this would be useful in ensuring there are no mixed doses of a medication. Importantly, it has now passed a key demonstration in animals of its safety and efficacy. The device's function is curious, as it is almost like a flower. It is swallowed as a pill. Once in the stomach, it opens up and exposes what could almost be described as petals, which contain the drug in question. This whole structure is far too large to leave the stomach, but not so large as to obstruct the primary exit into the duodenum. The drugs within each petal are then gradually released into the body over a period of up to a month. Then the overall structure breaks down, allowing it to pass out of the body. The primary hurdle they've now passed was a study of pigs that have a similar digestive tract to what humans have. The current initial safety findings will need to be further explored before any kind of human trials could begin. What is really interesting with this is that the initial idea comes from investigating possible ways of delivering other medications on a long-term basis, like that used in tuberculosis or malaria. And if it is successful for contraceptives, they may find that it is more easy to move medications from the current single-dose pill format to this long-term release format. In similar reproductive-related news, a rather controversial Danish study has found that abortions do not seem to have the close association with depression and risk of suicide that has been taught for many years. They examined data over 17 years and found that the risks associated with depression were not tied to the use of abortion services, but that these women had a closer association with access to psychiatric services prior to becoming pregnant. This could be extremely relevant in those areas where governments require women be informed of the risk of depression and suicide following an abortion, which has been controversial in and of itself, as some studies have been unable to replicate the findings of the research upon which these claims and decisions are based. The study is limited by focusing only on early stage and first abortions, which does remove the population which may have either experienced abortions later in the pregnancy or undergone the procedure multiple times. While you're still feeling slightly depressed by that, another unfortunate reality check finds that the US life expectancy has dropped for a third year in a row. The United States of America is a developed, relatively rich country, and this would normally be associated with several things, one being a higher incidence of meat consumption, but also greater life expectancy. Between 1959 and 2014, the duration of someone's lifespan increased year on year. From 2016-17 onwards, it has decreased. What is truly bizarre is not that it is the elderly dying sooner, but instead those aged between 25 and 64. They are not dying due to obvious causes, but instead due to health problems, opioid addictions, obesity-related disorders, alcoholic liver disease, and suicide. Consider that the average American is expected to live to just under 79 years, but the largest group of people dying is between 25 and 65. That 40-year age group has a far higher significance than those who live in the last 15 years of the average lifespan. The researchers behind this particular study attribute a large portion of this to people living in areas where the economy is suffering significantly, particularly primary industry, agriculture, and mining. These are areas that in the recent years have suffered due to economic pressures such as reducing coal consumption, steel mills moving overseas, and other similar jobs that take away employment from the uneducated and those with low skills. As a result, they rely more heavily on those things that can be accessed cheaply and easily, like alcohol and tobacco. These have an adverse effect on health, which reduces their life expectancy. This is backed up by the rates at which they are finding incidents spread across the US. One thing that cannot be attributed to this lowering average life expectancy are vaccine-preventable diseases, like those that have shut down a large part of Samoa. Samoa declared that it would shut down its government over 2 days so that public officials could begin to resolve the issue of a dangerous measles outbreak that has already killed 53 people and infected just under 4,000. Shutting down the government might seem like an odd solution to this, but they are not shutting down the government so as the employees were not employed. Instead, they are being redeployed to help in the vaccination efforts. That is how seriously this problem is being taken. As of Sunday, more than 58,000 people had already been inoculated. Samoan officials attribute this outbreak to a New Zealand tourist. They could cause this much harm by entering into a population that only had a 31% vaccination rate. This is well below the 90% that could be considered a minimum to provide protection, and an imperfect protection at that, or the 95% to reach herd immunity. This problem has reached such significant proportions and has so rocked the society of Samoa that houses that have unvaccinated individuals within are being literally marked with shame. They are to fly red flags outside of their houses where people have not been vaccinated to help teams locate them and give the free booster shots. This is on top of the just under 60,000 that have already been distributed. That is 60,000 vaccinations for a population of just under 200,000. That means in a week they have given a third of their country vaccinations, and they hope to be able to accomplish the other 2/3 during the 2 days that they shut down the government. In the meantime, they recognize that quarantine like this may not be the most effective approach, as measles has a relatively long incubation time and can remain in the environment long after someone has left the area. In fact, up to 4 hours. Anyone passing through there has a very high chance of picking it up and becoming infected. If they don't become infected themselves, they can pass it on to others who have not been vaccinated. In other medical news that is rather unusual and confusing, it's entirely possible that a lack of gravity could lead to the death of cancer cells. Australian researchers from the University of Technology have been investigating the possibility that gravity could be essential to the formation and longevity of cancer. In particular, they've developed a device which acts as a centrifuge, spinning very quickly and removing a large proportion of the effect of gravity. They then put 4 cancer cell lines into this: ovarian, breast, nose, and lung cancer cell lines. These had an 80 to 90% cell death rate through sheer lack of gravity and no other interventions. Considering how difficult it is to treat cancer cells with chemotherapy drugs, this is a significant accomplishment. The researchers believe the underlying mechanism comes down to the inability of cancer cells to come together without gravity. They need to have physical contact to be able to multiply and reproduce effectively. Without this, they begin to die off very quickly. Early next year, they will be sending a custom-designed module to the ISS. They will then be watching its progress over 7 days. They will also be able to do live cell imaging. After this, the cells will be frozen and shipped back to Earth. Once here, they will be examined for genetic changes. In other space-related news, NASA has finally identified the remnants of India's Vikram lunar lander. The Vikram was the lunar lander portion of India's Chandrayaan 2 mission. It was intended to land on the moon earlier this year. However, that did not occur due to a malfunction with the system. This led to it stopping very suddenly and very unexpectedly on the moon's surface. Unfortunately, it was so sudden and unexpected that it was shattered across the lunar landscape, coming back to Earth for a short time. You would think that if you were several thousands of kilometers away from Australia, its environment would really have no adverse effect on you. However, New Zealand is proving that wrong, when its glaciers turned red due to Australia's extreme weather. Parts of Australia's east coast are being burnt in bushfire, a very large area of the Australian east coast in fact. This has resulted in a lot of damage to both people, property, and the environment. There is also some belief that this extensive fire could be having an effect on New Zealand's glaciers. deposits are hypothesized to either be soot and charcoal from these fires, or it could possibly be the red-brown dust from Australia which has been carried over in the hot winds. This has imparted that red colour. In and of itself, the event is remarkable not only because it is so unexpected and bizarre, but that the factors required for it to occur are incredibly rare, both having these in the air, having them travelling in the right direction, and finally reaching New Zealand in adequate quantities to achieve this degree of coloration are just too many factors for the probability to be anything but remarkable when it does occur. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it interesting, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions below.